So good morning. My name is Reverend Dr. Ron Fox, and I'd like to welcome you to our Sunday celebration for the Center for Spiritual Living, Space Coast. And if there's anybody that's watching either this morning or anytime during the week, if you've never been to a Center for Spiritual Living before, we believe there's one God, many paths to that God, and we're here to love, honor, and support you no matter what your divine path is. And the Center for Spiritual Living, Space Coast is a safe haven for people of all beliefs and lifestyles. Wherever you find yourself on your journey of faith, you're welcome here. To begin our service this morning, my wife Becky, who's a practitioner emeritus, is going to open us with a prayer, and then one of our congregants, Ed Powers, is going to honor us with a spiritual reading. So Beck.
So I just invite everybody to turn within to that place of the Most High. This place where this infinite presence is, this infinite power. It is all-knowing, all-powerful, and everywhere present. And I'm knowing my oneness in infinite expression. It is who and what I am. It is the very, very beingness of my own expression. There is no separation, only oneness in infinite spirit. And I'm knowing this for each person who is on this session with us this morning and who is going to be viewing this later on, that each one of us is one in the divine. It is who and what we are. I'm knowing that this morning is filled with its joy, with its love, and that it is expressing easily and freely through each of us right here, right now. I'm knowing that this divine power is the very expression of Reverend Dr. Ron, and through his message, it reaches each one of us, touches our hearts and our minds, deepening our awareness of who and what we are, and our oneness in the divine. I am knowing that this morning is filled with love, that it opens up our hearts right here, right now, that it fills us with its warmth, fills us with its knowledge and wisdom. And so knowing this, I just release this, knowing that it is done. I claim it for each one of us right here now. And so it is.
So it is. Thank you.
Reading today is from Waking Up by Charles Hart. And I quote, "One of the safety and security needs we all have is a need for stability. Things seem safer if only the anticipated happens. There are no surprises, no changes. Indeed, we will often put up with unpleasant things for long periods of time, sometimes a lifetime, rather than take a chance on the unknown. This need for stability and fear of change are in conflict with our essential curiosity, our inherent desire for self-actualization. How can I observe myself or my world accurately and objectively unless I am willing to see whatever there is, whether I like it or not?" End quote. As Ricky Gervais says, beliefs don't change facts. Facts, if you're reasonable, should change your beliefs. And Douglas Noel Adams said, if you don't change your beliefs, your life will be the same forever. Now, if that's not good news, you should listen to what Reverend Dr. Ron Fox is about to say.
Thank you, Ed. So I do want to speak about beliefs today. You know, the way this message came about is, I think it was last Sunday, several of us had a conversation about beliefs, what they mean, and how you change them. So I want to address it a little further today, and I titled it, "Believe It and See It." So Ernest Holmes, who founded the Center for Spiritual Living, said many years ago that your word has power. And that is why everything in your life depends upon your beliefs. And that's why we say it is done unto you as you believe, because our belief sets the limits to our demonstration. And Holmes said that we have a power that has no limits. So it's not a question of spirit's willingness or its ability to be with us and to demonstrate in our life. It's simply a matter of our receptivity, how receptive we are to knowing the truth and working on that. So let me give you an example. This is I don't remember where I read it, but I do know it's a true story. And the story was narrated by a woman who was talking about her dad. And she said, ever since she could remember being a young girl, her father said, I am going to die when I'm 75. I am not going to live beyond 75. And it was just an ingrained belief in him. And part of the reason he believed it was because his father died when he was 75. And I don't know if he thought it was in his genes or what, but that was his belief. Comes the day he hits 75 and he's in really good health. Everything is terrific. They have a great birthday party for him. And she said, a couple of months later, out of the blue, he develops cancer and he died. He died, she said, just as he believed. He died before he reached 76. He had affirmed that his entire life, and it came true for him. You know, the truth is, we need to have a reason to change our belief or our beliefs. And I was thinking about that this week, and I thought, you know what a really good reason is to change your beliefs? That your life isn't working. If your life's not working, why not look for a way to make it different, to make it better? And, you know, I know that's not easy to do. And Greg Braden writes that it's really difficult to change our belief. And the reason is because to change our belief changes our identity. You know, we put stuff out to the world and it becomes who we are. And we become comfortable with it because even if our life's not going well, we kind of know what to expect and where it's going to be. And we go very comfortable with how we see the world and what we're experiencing. And, you know, an example I thought of in my own life, I had an aunt that I absolutely adored. In fact, I was closer with her than I was with my own mom. And she had a daughter, and I looked at her daughter as being my big sister. And my cousin married somebody who was very well off. He was a multimillionaire. And after a while, their marriage just was not really good. And I must have been 12 or 13. And I heard my aunt speaking to my mother saying how my cousin was really unhappy with the marriage. And my aunt's response to her was, stick with it. Better the devil that you know than the devil that you don't know. And it was said out of love, but think about that. Better stay in an unhappy situation than to try to make it better. And it goes back to what Braden said, because there's a comfort level. There's a comfort level in that. You know, we control our own thoughts. They originate within us. And Wayne Dyer said our thoughts, same thing. Holmes said that our thoughts create our health, they create our wealth, and they create every detail in our world. And Dyer said too that there are no limits. Limits are a process of how we learned how to think, what we were taught. And so if we believe in limits, there are limits. If we believe there are no limits, then there are no limits. So H.B. Jeffrey wrote a book titled The Principles of Healing, and it was published in 1939. And we used to use it to teach practitioners. I think it's out of publication now, so I'm not sure you can get it, but it's a really, really good basic book on healing. And he wrote in there, he said, man isn't put in hell by a superior being. Man puts himself in hell by the state of his belief. And he gives an interesting example. He said, cowboys that had ponies, when the ponies' reins were free, but hanging down, so they were totally free, but they were just hanging straight down. The ponies were free, but they didn't know it. They were trained to believe that the reins were fastened to something, so they would stay in the same spot for hours. They wouldn't move. He said they were perfectly free, but they weren't free because they were tethered in their mind. In their mind, they believed that they were tethered. And he said, you know what? The same is true for a lot of us. We're tethered by belief in something that isn't true. Our consciousness determines the limits of our life. And the first step in changing our beliefs is to become aware of them. You can't change something that you're not aware of. And so if you don't acknowledge it, you're not going to be able to change it. And Joe Dispenza has written a lot about that. And he says, and I'm going to give you an example he uses in a minute, but one of the things he said is to change our reality. To change our reality, we need to change how we think, how we feel, and how we act. We need to think, to act, and to feel in a different way. And in one of his books, he gives a really outstanding example. So at the time he was writing it, he had a daughter who was 20 years old, and she was going to college and studying art. And he asked her, when the term was ending, he said to her, what would you like to do this summer? And he said she didn't just have any thought of, oh, I just want to get a summer job. Here's what she wanted to do that summer. She wanted to go to Italy to learn and experience new things. She wanted to visit 6 cities. She wanted to spend at least 1 week in Florence, and she only wanted to work part of the summer. She wanted to work the first half, but she wanted to spend the second half at home. Here's the advice that he gave her. He said, you need to not just set the intention once. You need to set the intention every day. And you need to feel what it's like to experience it. You need to feel what it's like to experience Italy, to experience going to 6 cities, to experience spending a week in Florence. And he said, you have to be that person in Italy. You have to be there. You have to be her. And he said, when you sit down to visualize this experience and to meditate on it, when you sit down and do that, you can't get up from your meditation as the same person who sat down. You hear that? You can't get up as the same person that sat down. you have to be that person that's in Italy. So, and actually, she came back to her dad one time, and there was a way she could have done it if he paid some money. And he said, no, he said, you know, keep doing what you're doing. So one day she was in the school library and she met up with her art history teacher, and they started talking. And she was telling her dad somehow the conversation flowed into Italian. It started out in English and they started speaking Italian. And as they did, he remembered that one of his colleagues was looking for somebody to teach a group of American students in Italy that summer. They were looking to have somebody go with them to teach these American students level 1 Italian in Italy. So she applies for the job, and of course she gets it, and she's getting paid to teach. And here's the details. They were going to be in Italy. They were going to be traveling. So they were going to be visiting 6 cities. The last city they were going to visit was Florence, where they would spend a week. And she would be able to be home for the second half of the summer because it was only a half summer job. And what Dispenza said was, by doing the work, she created the effect that she was looking for. She put out the cause and she created the effect. The message is, if you continue to think and feel the same way, you'll continue to create the same circumstances. When you change the way you think and feel, then you can create new circumstances. You know, when I was preparing this, I was thinking to myself, well, I really hope everybody remembers most of what I say. But if I was going to say to you, if there was one thing to remember, it would be what I'm going to say next. This is from Alan Cohen's book, Dare to Be Yourself. And he says, ask yourself this question: what would someone have to believe to keep attracting situations like this? And you know, it doesn't have to be negative. It could be negative, it could be positive. Ask yourself, what would someone have to believe to keep attracting situations like this? You know, Ernest Holmes, years ago, I tell people when we take the foundation class this, he said, you know, theoretically, you should be able to change your life with one prayer, but very few people do that. We change incrementally. We change one day at a time, one thought at a time. Most of us, we can't change our beliefs all at once. And what we need to do is to reinforce our new beliefs. And how do we do that? We do it with spiritual practice. A spiritual practice helps us grow in wisdom. It helps us grow in faith. It helps us learn to forgive, to change, to connect with spirit, to listen to spirit, and to connect with the love that's within. And I was reading a piece this week by somebody named Ding Ming Dao, and he was writing about spiritual practice. And he said, we need to repeat it so it becomes enduring. And he said, if it's done in the moment, it very rarely lasts. And he said, just like a farmer needs to tend his crops every day in order to get a harvest, the same is true of spiritual practice. Daily living spirituality is what has meaning. It helps us weather storms. It helps us resolve conflicts, and it makes us a kinder, a gentler person. You know, I think I might have talked about this before, but I read years ago about a cardinal who was in Rome. He was on the fast track, so to speak. And after he was in Rome for a while, he gained all kinds of weight, and he realized he was more into politics than spirituality. So he asked to come home. And when he came home, he wanted to get in touch with that spirituality. And so he would get up early in the morning, like 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning. And he would spend 2 hours reading, praying, and meditating. And he said they weren't always great meditations or great prayers, but that was his time with God. And I picked up on that. And that's how I look at the day that I prepare my message every Friday and sometimes part of Saturday. I don't look at it as I'm going to prepare a message. I look at it as I spend almost all of my Friday with God, meditating, praying, and reading. And out of that time comes a message. And so what is a spiritual practice? You know, I wrote a list down. This is not all inclusive. You can add to it, but it can be a lot of things. It can be praying. It can be journaling. It can be writing affirmations and repeating them. You know, I think Louise Hay said, when you write an affirmation to change your thinking, say it 100 times a day. There's all kinds of times a day that you can say a meditation. I know I have one, an affirmation. I know I have one that I try to repeat tons of times every day. And here it is: the infinite mind of God prepares me. You know what? I just blew it. I'll come back to it. Okay. So we have prayer, we have journaling, we have affirmations. We can spend time in the silence, meditating. You don't have to meditate. You can just spend time in silence. You can take a walk in nature. You can do something artistic, have some kind of artistic expression. You can read spiritual material. You can take classes and workshops. You can participate in spiritual community, listen to music, attend the service. There are all kinds of things that we can do. Here we go. The infinite mind of God provides me with every idea I need to effect perfect ministry for those people who have come to me and will come to me. The infinite mind of God provides me with every idea I need to effect perfect ministry for those people who have come to me and will come to me. That's just an example of an affirmation that I do all the time. So pick up something that feels comfortable for you, that you like to do, and begin that spiritual practice. I read an article this week by a couple, Frederick and Mary Broussard, and they were writing on transformation. And they said transformation is renewal that comes from enlightenment. It's a deepening from getting in touch with our higher self. It's shedding old ways and knowing that it's still possible to be and do something new. And they said, you know, you can start with really simple stuff. Like if you walk to work, walk in a new route. If you drive to work, take a different route. If when your telephone rings, pick it up with a different hand. You know, what they're saying is break a pattern, do something different. And when we transform ourselves, we invite healing and we invite wholeness. So I want to close with something that I know I've done before, but for me, it's one of the best example, if not the best example, that I have ever seen of a belief affecting somebody's life. And I got this from a book by Jack Kornfield. So Kornfield writes that a woman named Paula came to see him for counseling. And her husband had just left her and her 6-year-old son. And when she came to him, he said she was in grief, she was in fear, and she was really angry. And he said a voice kept telling her how unlovable she was and that she would always be left and she would always be abandoned. She said, "That's the story of my life. My father left my mother and I when I was 3 years old. He left our life and he never came back. He died several years after that." And she said, "I felt like his leaving was my fault, that it was she who was flawed and unlovable." So in one of the counseling sessions, Jack Kornfield asks her if she would go back to the night her dad left, and she would discuss it. And she said yes. She said, "I'm standing at the top of the stairs listening to my parents argue. And all of a sudden, he grabs his suitcase and without looking up, he storms out of the door and out of my life." She said, he didn't even look up at me. He didn't say anything to me. And she told Kornfield what she thought was, I did something wrong. There's something wrong with me, or he would have stayed. After she calms down a little, Kornfield asked her if she would go back to that night and in essence become her father. Repeat the night to him as if she were her father. And this is what took place. He said to her, "How do you feel?" And she said, "Tight, rigid, like I'm going to explode. I'm terrified. I'm stuck in a marriage that I didn't want. I'm in a dead-end job. We fight all the time. I have to escape. I have to run away to save my life." And then Kornfield says, "And now, as you pick up your bag, do you know your daughter is standing at the top of the stairs?" And the response is, "I do, but I can't look up at her. If I do, I'll never be able to leave. I love her so much. I love her so much. But if I can't leave, I'll die. I have to get out." And then Kornfield turns to Paula and he said, "So, who made up the story? You did something wrong." And she said, "I did." And he said, "Is it true?" And she said, "No." Can you see the power of a belief? One false belief in Paula's life set the tone for every relationship she had with every man in her life because she believed she wasn't lovable. One false belief. But the good news is that each and every one of us has the power to change, to make our life better, to be able to live the dream that we hold in our heart. And let me close with these words from Ernest Holmes, who wrote, "We must become what we want, and we will never be able to do that while we still persist in seeing what we do not want, no matter where we see it." Thank you for being with us this morning. God bless you, and have a